Hello, welcome to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I am, of course, Robert, the board narrator, and I'm back with another quick episode of Confessions. Or actually, it won't be quick. It probably won't be quick. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another character with my system. So last episode, my system Rise that I've been developing, I made John McClane from Die Hard. You can see him here on the top. And a couple of things that I didn't explain when I made the character, and I want to apologize for that noise in the background. That is my guinea pig drinking water, so that's the clicking sound that you hear, and hopefully you don't hear the rumbling of my neighbor playing a bunch of loud music, but if you do hear some rumbling bass, that's what that is. But anyway, and hopefully my air conditioner or heat doesn't kick in. But yeah, a couple of things that I didn't explain when I made John McClane. I knew I was going to say McCain last episode. Apologize for that, but it's John McClane that I am speaking about, the action hero from Die Hard. I didn't explain exactly what the virtues mean, other than the fact that they set how many advances you are allowed to have in the attributes related to a particular virtue. And not only do they allow you to get what are called virtue abilities in-game, special abilities related to the virtue, but they also tell me, and I touched on this a little bit last episode, what kind of character your character is. It helps you role play your character. It kind of helps set your character's motivation and beliefs. So if you look at John McClane here, John McClane is a fairly aggressive character and not very diplomatic, fairly tricky or deceitful, a little bit of honor, little bit of leadership, not a big collaborator. So when I look at this character, essentially what the virtues help you do, and as I said last episode, I was trying to come up with a system that was similar to alignment, but actually was much more straightforward and meant something in the game. This kind of gives the player a guide to how the character should be played. So generally, I would think John McClane would choose to solve problems with action, maybe with his fists or with a gun. And he's not a super friendly diplomatic guy. And he definitely has some tricks up his sleeve. And he's not, it doesn't necessarily mean that he is a dishonorable person, but he definitely tries to solve problems by maybe sneaking around the issue. And what that means for the game is when a player is playing the game, if they play the character very aggressively and very physically, especially when that could complicate the character's life, I think that would be good role playing. Now, I've said this before in other videos and on other websites that these virtues are not meant to pigeonhole a player or to force their player into playing their character in a particular way, but it's kind of a guide to me to give a really quick, straightforward view of what type of person the character is. And I would tend to reward the player when they portray the character accurately. So, not forcing John McClane to use fisticuffs to solve every problem, but when he decides to do so, it is more in line with what you would expect from the character. So it's an accurate portrayal of the character. So that's really, of all of the things that I did discuss about the virtues, obviously relating it to kind of alignment and your character's moral beliefs and personality. That's also what the virtues bring to the game. So this episode, I wanted to make James Bond a much more, I think, larger than life character than John McClane, though John McClane definitely had some action movie hero and vulnerability going on in Die Hard. I think James Bond is even more fantastical, and I am under no illusion that a starting level character would really be able to accurately simulate James Bond, but I'm going to try to get as close as possible using the character creation system. So we're going to start from the top. We're going to start by picking the character's virtues. As you may or may not remember from last episode, when you're figuring out the character's virtues, you get 3 pools of points. You get 7 points to divide amongst the virtue pairing that has the virtue that is most important to the character, 5 points to divide amongst the virtue pairing that has the virtue in it that's secondary in importance to the character, and 3 points to divide amongst the virtue pairing that is tertiary in importance to the character. And the only caveat with that is each virtue has to have at least 1 point assigned to it. So, James Bond. Now, James Bond is definitely a man of action. There is no two ways about it. But I think that where John McClane was definitely an aggressive man of action, something that I think about Bond that I don't think about John McClane is how much of a smooth operator that James Bond is. He's very suave. He's very persuasive. He can be very tricky. And of course, he's incredibly intelligent. So though he is a man of action, one of the aspects that really pops out to me for James Bond is how smooth and suave he is. So I think that instead of going with dividing the 7 points amongst aggression and diplomacy, for James Bond, I think I want to divide that 7 points amongst deceit and honor. And of course, deceit has deception, security system, stealth, streetwise, and thievery. All of those I can see being very important for Bond. Now, which one would be most important? I wouldn't say that Bond is a dishonorable guy, but I can definitely see him in honor. You have persuasion and you have willpower. What I'm going to do for Bond is I'm going to put 4 in deceit, and I'm going to put 3 in honor, because he does have a particular code. He is in His Majesty or Her Majesty's Secret Service, so he does have a particular code of honor and does have an eye towards justice and fighting evil. But he also does have several tricks up his sleeve. So I'm going to put 4 of the 7 in deceit and 3 in honor, because Bond is a very persuasive fellow. He has this way about him, even if as a spy, he's not always being super honest. He does have a way about him that makes you trust him. And then I think for the 5 points, I'm definitely going to put that in aggression and diplomacy. The 5 points I'm going to put 3 in aggression, because he is a man of action, and 2 in diplomacy, because there are a couple of things in diplomacy. As a spy, he's good at gathering information and negotiation. And then here at the bottom, collaboration and leadership. He has been known to work with other agents. I don't think that's Bond's strongest suit, but he definitely has some leadership type skills. He's knowledgeable. He's good at surviving and good at tactics. I don't know how inspiring Bond is. So I'm going to put 2 in 3 points. I'm going to put 2 in leadership and 1 in collaboration. So we have figured out, unlike John McClane, what I'll show you here is McClane, I put the 7 points in aggression and diplomacy, 5 in aggression, 2 in diplomacy, and I put the 5 points in honor and deceit. I put 3 points in deceit and 2 points in honor. The reason McClane is showing a 5 in deceit is because I randomly rolled on the life path chart. That's part of character creation, and he got a +2 to his deceit, and then pretty much the same thing in leadership and collaboration. So, moving on. The virtue abilities. They are the special abilities related to virtue that the character can use in game. The requirement for the virtue abilities is that you select the virtue ability that has a 4 in it, and you can get that virtue ability. Since the only virtue ability that has a 4 in it for Bond is deceit, it's actually going to be deceit. And this doesn't perfectly fit with Bond, but it's what we have here. So the deceit virtue ability is you add your deceit score to the damage of an attack when attacking a surprised character. So that doesn't perfectly fit with Bond, but it is what it is. I could see if he had a high enough diplomacy, I could see him using the diplomacy one. If he had high enough collaboration, I could see the collaboration one being appropriate for him. But yeah, deceit is what we have, so we're going to go ahead and go with deceit as his virtue ability that he can use during the game. The next part of character creation is to pick Bond's path, which in Rise, path is basically your character class. So we have a leader, which gets advances in inspiration, knowledge, melee weapons, ranged weapons, tactics, and willpower. Leader isn't bad, but that really doesn't, I don't think leader when I'm thinking Bond. Scrapper, survival, security systems, piloting, knowledge, and repair. Don't really think about that way about Bond either. Scout, animal handling, athletics, physique, and advance in stealth and survival. 2 in stealth and 2 in survival. Nah. Shadow. Now, Shadow, athletics, melee weapons, security systems, 2 advances in stealth and 2 advances in thievery. Now we're getting close, I think. Shaman, no. Shaman are strictly, as I said, psionics. War Brother, which is all combat and intimidation, no. And one that I didn't mention, Whisper. Whisper is kind of the information gatherer, very, very spy-like. 2 advances in deception, 2 in gather information, 1 in persuasion, 1 in streetwise, and 1 in knowledge. Now, Whisper, that sounds very spy-like. That sounds very Bond-like. No attack attributes in there, but again, you can always purchase that separately. You know what? Of all of these, I think Whisper is the one that fits Bond the most. So I'm going to go with Whisper. It's a very spy-like path. So, cool. I'm going to do that. So, you get 2 advances in Deception. So, again, all of the attributes start at a D8 -1. So, 2. And here's the advancing chart here. So, 2 advances will take him up to a D12 in Deception. I'm going to write it lightly in case it changes. 2 advances in Gather Information. That is the maximum he can get. So, that goes up to a D12. So, see, even though he isn't the best at diplomacy, it doesn't mean that you're pigeonholed into doing one thing or the other. He can still have fairly good ratings and attributes that aren't the focus of the character. You can always diversify a little bit. Then he gets an advance in Persuasion, which sounds just like Bond, so that takes it up to a D8. Streetwise, I guess he's been a world traveler. He knows his way around the streets and shadowy organizations. And knowledge. I think Bond is knowledgeable. You have to be knowledgeable when you're a world traveler. So those are all of the advances that you get as a Whisper. And I'll write Whisper here for the path. And your path also determines your total values for your defenses. So he gets a 5 in dodge, a 5 in parry, a 5 in psionic, a 7 in social, which I think is perfectly like Bond, and a 6 in illusion defense against. Again, that's the defense against the character being surprised, which I also think is very appropriate for Bond. The only thing that I don't like is these low ratings in the combat ones, but, excuse me, we can always resolve that by pumping up some of his combat abilities with special maneuvers to dodge and so forth using expertise points. So we finished determining Bond's career. Now we go down to choosing birth sign. Birth sign is something I added to the game that I thought was very different and very cool. You can pick it or you can roll it, and I think I'm going to pick it for Bond. And because of Bond's combat training, I think I'm going to have him born under the war sign. So I write the war sign. That is his birth sign. And what your birth sign gives you is what are called expertise points. If you saw the first video, you know what expertise points do. And they allow you to divide 12 points amongst the expertise, the attributes under a particular virtue. And of course, the virtue is aggression. So I have 12 points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 4 in hand-to-hand fighting. No, 3 in hand-to-hand fighting, 3 in melee, 3 in range weapons, and 3 in athletics. That makes sense to me for Bond. So put those, excuse me, and the aggression virtue. And then moving on, the next step is life events. So what you do is you find the virtue with the highest score. That would be deceit. From the charts below, and choose an event or randomly roll one from the chart. So I'm going to randomly roll under the deceit chart, and it's a D8. A little bit of randomness is good. And here we go. I roll, and it's number 1. So I got the chart over here. Deceit. he gets an advance in deception. So his deception, which I think is very appropriate for Bond, his deception goes up to a D8 and a D12. So whenever he tries to do something, he would roll a D8 and a D12. So for example, if he was trying to deceive someone who was as socially competent as himself, he has a 7 in the social defense. I would grab a D12 and a D8 for Bond. Let me grab a D12 here. Here we are. And he would roll, and he would be looking for a 7 or better. So you roll, and you take the higher die. So you roll a 12, so that was successful. Roll again. Successful again. And one more time to see if, and that time he missed. So that time he did not successfully deceive the person. Roll again. Again, he didn't successfully deceive the person. So that's the mechanic. Whatever your die rank is, you roll, and you're usually rolling against a fixed defense number, like you see here, or you're rolling against a target number determined by the game master. So that's the first life event. The second life event is another chart that you have to roll randomly on, and you roll a D12 and a D8, and you add them together. So that is an 11. So 11, Student of the Void. So these don't have any definitions. You just have a little blurb there of something that happened. This is the recent life events chart, and I leave it to the player to figure out what the blurb means. So the blurb is Student of the Void. And so you write right here, life events, background, personality. You write Student of the Void. And what Student of the Void gives you is the ability to divide 4 expertise points amongst deceit attributes. So that's perfect. 4 expertise points amongst deceit. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to put, what the heck? I'm going to put all 4 of them into stealth. Put all 4 of them into stealth. No, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and right now and put all 4 of them into deception, because Bond is fairly good at deception. Then, moving along here, buying gear is next, but that's a group activity. The entire party buys gear all together. The amount of gear, as I mentioned, the amount of gear that the party starts with is based on everyone, all of the party members totaling up their leadership and collaboration, working together to get the party gear. And something else that's cool, and then essentially, just to really quickly point out, what the characters do is they total up their leadership and collaboration virtue, and that gives them a certain number of what's called scrounge points. The game is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi game, so scrounge points, so it's basically the amount of gear that they were able to scrounge. And then what each party member can do is they can decide to either add their deceit virtue score to the party total, or the diplomacy virtue score to the total, not both. Any player who adds their deceit total to the score means that they have deceived someone, they've really angered someone, so they've made an enemy at that level of whatever level their deceit virtue ability is. And I actually have a contact chart, and the contact chart is very similar to what the diplomacy virtue ability uses for the level of the enemy. So anyone who uses their deceit virtue to increase the party's starting gear also earns the party an enemy, because maybe they stole that gear from that individual or did something deceitful to get it. And anyone who decides to add their diplomacy, you can't do both, one or the other, has an ally or a friend who did them a favor and will come asking for a favor. And that's how they got that portion of the gear. So it's really awesome. And also, the person with the highest leadership in the party gets to decide gear up to their leadership value. They get to decide what gear they get up to their leadership. So let's say if someone had a leadership of 6 and that was the highest, then 6 scrounge points of gear they would be able to decide upon without any input from anyone else. And that's kind of cool, I think. So yeah, buying gear is a group activity or party activity. And the last part of customization. So as a Whisper, Bond has a health of 15 and a wind of 22. And then also for customization purposes, the character can add 6 advances for any of his attributes, up to 6 advances for his attributes, and gets 8 expertise points for dividing amongst his attributes. So this is really going to be where I have to pump up Bond's weapon skills. So firearms, so take 2 of those advances and put him in firearm to get his firearms up to D12. So that's 2. And piloting. Let's put 1 into piloting because Bond is always driving. Give him a D8. And again, as I said, this is a starting character. Bond clearly would be better than this character. So that's 3, and I get 3 more advances. I'm going to put 1 of those advances in stealth for Bond. 1 of those advances in hand-to-hand fighting. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 more. I'm going to put in tactics because I think Bond is good at tacticalizing, strategizing. So, and then you get 8 expertise points to divide expertise points. So, yeah, Bond is really persuasive. So we get 8. So I'm going to put 2 here, 2 expertise in persuasion, 2 in piloting, 2 in gather information, and 2 in tactics. So that is Bond. James Bond completed here. I'll write the name, character James Bond, and let's compare him to John McClane. So John McClane has better weapons, range weapons, melee weapons, which I think was a choice that was a random choice from somewhere. Bond is much better at gathering information. He is not as good at stealthing. I don't know. McClane spent an entire movie stealthing around. McClane has no piloting. McClane has a better willpower than Bond does. I mean, Bond doesn't strike me as a guy who has a lot of willpower. He really loves the ladies, and that gets him in trouble a whole lot. McClane is a little, yeah, like I said, a little stealthier. So yeah, that's a breakdown of James Bond, making James Bond for my game. So that's it. And thanks for checking out this video. Talk to you later.